The secrets of free energy, the secret space program, or the true nature of the cosmos. The governments of the world and the hidden masters of the New World Order are, at this point, the most discussed topic in the online environment and vehemently denied by the American government.
Did you look? Did you see? Did you explore?
I can't reveal anything.
Oh, really? Did you go through the secret files, the UFO documents? Because if I was president, that'd be the first thing I did.
You know, it's funny. My daughters asked the very same question.
They did?
Yeah.
Would you be allowed to tell your daughters what was in those files?
No.
You would not?
No.
Now that you're out of office, you can do anything you want, right?
True, yeah. But I'm not telling you.
It makes it increasingly less likely that we're alone.
Oh, you're trying to give me a hint that there are aliens.
No, I'm trying to tell you I don't know.
But I would like us to go into those files and hopefully make as much of that public as possible. If there's nothing there, let's tell people there's nothing there.
What if there is something there?
Well, if there is something there, unless it's a threat to national security, I think we ought to share it with the public.
The aliens won't let it happen. You reveal all their secrets. They exercise strict control over us.
As we all know, the media, still in the hands of the global evil elite, do not sweat any words about the existing technologies it owns that could pull mankind away from the crisis, but also from the fossil fuel age and the provision of free energy to mankind, thus making an enormous leap in the evolution of civilization.
A whopping $6.5 trillion of taxpayer cash have gone to defense programs, and this black budget has sparked concerns over political fraud, as Gained Chikan now reports.
Black budget spending, as well as the causes behind greater levels of spending at the local and national.
The so-called black budget has never been shown to the public.
Black budget began to come to light after October-November 2012 and rely primarily on the personal testimony of an insider named Daniel, who claims to have been part of the Montauk Project, which later turned into Phoenix 1, 2, and 3. These black budget projects are carefully guarded by the eyes of the public. One of the main objectives involved in these projects was the testing and development of many technologies based on Nikola Tesla's work: cold fusion, Pons and Fleischmann, nuclear energy reacts, antimatter and anti-hydrogen propulsion systems, and others. The development of these technologies has led to the creation of a secret space program that goes well beyond the scope of information NASA has chosen to publicly release in terms of the true nature of the cosmos.
Liftoff of Space Shuttle Atlantis on a mission to build, resupply, and to do research on the International Space Station.
Houston now controlling. Atlantis begins its penultimate journey to shore up the International Space Station.
Many of these projects are funded from the black budget, with huge sums of money, and by the global banking cartel as part of the diversion of global collateral accounts. One of the most stunning public information on the existence of this secret space program comes from the testimony of British Gary McKinnon. His story is extraordinary. From February 2001 to March 2002, McKinnon, as an independent computer system administrator, managed to gain access to the highly classified documentation of the Pentagon's computer networks. The U.S. government claims that McKinnon violated the operating law in the Defense Ministry's IT system, which posed a threat to national security.
We completely understand that Gary McKinnon stands accused of a very important and significant crime in terms of hacking into vital databases, and nobody denies that that is an important crime that has to be considered.
One of the things that David and I discussed was the increasing challenge that we're going to face as a consequence of the internet and the need for us to cooperate extensively on issues of cybersecurity.
The first thing was documentation. I used a program called Land Search, a thing that once you had control over the domain, because you'd get control of domain controllers, so you own the whole network, basically. And LandSearch could actually search all the files and folders on every machine. And obviously it's hard because things aren't going to be called secret UFO data.pdf, are they? So, but I'd scan and look for documents, etc., and I found an Excel spreadsheet that was actually called, or at least in the heading of the column, it said non-terrestrial officers. And I was like, my God, that's just
non-terrestrial officers.
Non-terrestrial officers, with ranks and names, and then a separate sheet with tabs for material transfer between ships. And these were, I mean, I don't remember the names now. It's a long time ago. A lot of people give me a hard time for not remembering the names and stuff, but it was a long time ago.
Right.
But non-terrestrial officers, I thought, well, it must be, let's try and cut out all the possible conventional explanations first. I searched for that term, it was nowhere. It was nowhere at all. Now if you search for the term, you only find links to me and stuff that I've said.
Right, I see.
So it wasn't a standard thing in the military at all.
Right.
So I took that to be, they must have a secret space-based.
The government tagged McKinnon as hacker and cyber terrorist. Over the years, the U.S. government has demanded the extradition of McKinnon from England. However, there was an obstacle in their plans. If he was extradited, he had the legal right to appear before a court, and there is the risk of revealing the true nature of information in the Pentagon's computer files. The existence of the Solar Warden codename given to a particular area in the secret space program. McKinnon admitted during live interviews that the government's accusations against him are being manufactured, and he has not caused any harm to the Pentagon's digital operating systems. Once the U.S. government learned about the true nature of the information over which McKinnon fined, the U.S. abandoned the accusations against him, despite the fact that the U.S. considered him a cyber terrorist.
And I only got to see about half or 2/3 of it or something, but it was a hemisphere of a planet, which I assume was Earth, because it was blue and it was cloudy. And but it was a classic cigar shape, with no seams, no rivets, no sort of workmanship on the outside. But it did have one sort of human-looking thing, which was the sort of geodesic domes that you see at Men with Hell. Above and below, to the left and the right, and one on its nose, and I assume, one on this side, and I assume one on the other side as well. So I mean, some people say that could have been man-made because of that geodesic dome feature. But the fact of it all flowed in. There was no, there's the tube, and there's a socket for the dome. It was all a flowing, But that's when I saw someone else, the mouse moved, right-clicked on the LAN icon, disconnect, and boom, that was gone.
If these black-budget technologies were released in the world and properly funded, in a generation or even less, we would see the complete end of fossil fuels, oil, coal, natural gas, and even nuclear energy that would be replaced by Tesla electromagnetism, anti-gravity and anti-hydrogen systems, and much more. This would remove national boundaries and limits and eliminate the need for control structures of any kind, including governments. We also enter a new era of travel in the universe, through which we as human beings move beyond the planetary boundaries and our solar system.
To seek out new life forms and new civilizations. To boldly go where no one has gone.
Exchange technology and experience with the civilizations of the universe. But when it is considered that the ramifications of these things, for those who hold power today in this world, secret societies, bankers, fossil fuel companies, etc., become dangerous for their control over the planet, they will go very far in their actions.
Oh my God,
For that these technologies are never made available to the public, and disclosure of the true nature of the cosmos is a well-guarded secret. McKinnon was charged by the Bush administration for having committed the biggest military computer hack of all time, facing prison time up to 70 years after extradition from the UK.
In March of 2002, I was arrested for hacking into Army, Navy and Air Force computers, as well as the Pentagon and NASA. The arresting officers from the National High-Tech Crime Unit, which is now part of SOCA, the Serious Organised Crime Agency, told me that I'd probably do 6 months community service. This turned out to be a highly inaccurate prediction. My arresting officers went to Washington and met with some top brass to discuss my case, and also to illegally hand over my hard drive to US authorities, which they're still in possession of. The police officers were obviously very impressed by the military officers they'd met, because when they returned from Washington and interviewed me for the second time, they had a very serious tone about them. It was a very different ball game by then. The second interview was in the summer of 2002, in August, I think. And in November of the same year, the US authorities announced that they intended to extradite me to stand trial in America. And on paper, at least, I was facing 70 years in jail, which was a far cry from 6 months community service.
However, trying McKenna in an open court would involve his testifying to the above classified facts, and his attorney would be able to subpoena government officers to testify under oath about the U.S. space fleet. To date, the extradition of McKinnon to the U.S. has not been enforced. McKinnon allegedly discovered information about the craft within Solar Warden. It is said that there are approximately 8 cigar-shaped motherships, each longer than 2 football fields end to end, and 43 small scout ships.
Among the things I found, there was an Excel spreadsheet entitled Non-Terrestrial Officers, which I took to be a space-going fleet made of human personnel, not aliens. It did list their names, and I couldn't find them on the internet at the time. There was also a list of ships, and I googled the ship names, and there were no matches. So I knew there weren't ocean-going vessels.
The Solar Warden Space Fleet operates under Air Force Space Command. There are at least 300 personnel involved at this facility. Solar Warden is said to be made up of U.S. aerospace black projects contractors, with some contributions of parts and systems by Canada, also United Kingdom, Italy, Austria, Russia, and Australia. It is also said that the program is tested and operated from secret Air Force bases, such as Area 51 in Nevada, USA. Another newer version of the definition and description of Solar Warden is that it isn't the Earth's interstellar space program itself. That is called the SOC. But Solar Warden is in fact the name of a research project that would create sunspots and send the solar waves to directional nodes in space, which in turn aim the solar waves at targets like a rogue asteroid or an alien spacecraft that had flown into our solar system unannounced, without permission, and with hostile intentions. After years of fighting in court for having illegally accessed NASA's computers, the hacker is talking about the findings he has made at the time. McKinnon told the judges and the press that he found evidence of technologies of alien origin, the existence of energy capable of stopping the global warming process, anti-gravity devices, and, above all, the existence of a real stellar fleet capable of driving huge distances across cosmic space.
Interestingly, some of the names of these ships were people allegedly involved in Majestic 12. If there was a secret space program, and if it has anything to do with back engineering crashed alien spacecraft, then those MJ-12 people are exactly the ones you would expect to find name-checked in this way.
Secrecy associated with MJ-12, in my judgment, has permitted us to spend a huge amount of money, trillions of dollars. My more recent conclusion is that some of the trillions of dollars of money have been used to take the technology we have discovered and build gravity-controlled devices that we would see sometimes as UFOs. So if you look in the sky now, in my opinion, it's 50-50 chance that it's ours versus theirs.
Gary McKinnon thinks he has found enough evidence to assert that the Americans have a secret space program run by the Navy, that is, spaceships. According to metro.co.uk, all the details are reported in an ample interview with Rich Planet TV, known for its UFO programs. We used a program called Land Search to help us access all the tabs and folders. There, we found an Excel file named Non-Terrestrial Officers, the officers from outside the Earth. The file contained names and ranks, and material transfers were specified between ships, and the name of the spacecraft began with the USS.
Oh no, they're all like this. I used that one single method to gain entry to the places I got into.
Right, and are you allowed to say which other places you got into, or?
Well, I'll say it was the Army, the Navy, and NASA, and the Pentagon.
Right, right. And were they all on separate banks of IP addresses, each of those that you've just mentioned?
Oh yeah, completely separate blocks.
Right, so you knew whether you were trying to access NASA or Pentagon or Army, Navy, they're all in completely different IP ranges.
Yeah, but once you're in there, it can get a bit confusing, because once you start exploring, there's attached networks, other networks, private networks, and in the end, you're not really sure where you are after a while.
Right.
But what evidence would McKenna have found? Alien visits hidden to the public because the space images were altered to the NASA Johnson Space Center. Here, for example, UFOs were taken out of the photographs.
I double-clicked on this image, and it was coming down very slowly, but I could see this tubular, a classic cigar-shaped UFO, these kind of geodesic domes, like half a golf ball stuck on top and underneath. And I'm just amazed, because I've found real evidence of what I thought was a UFO, although it could have been a secret spaceship, who knows. But there it was in front of me, coming down the screen. And then suddenly I saw the mouse move across the screen, right-click the LAN icon and choose disconnect, and lost the chance to fully transfer the photo to my machine. So it was a eureka moment, but also, they got me.
McKinnon found on NASA's servers a high-definition image of a large cigar-like object floating above the northern hemisphere. When he hacked the U.S. Army servers, McKinnon discovered a diary of all non-terrestrial officers, proof that the U.S. Army had a secret battalion in space. Some of the U.S. ships are called USSS LeMay or USSS Hillenkoetter, USSS coming from the United States spaceship, the U.S. Space Shuttle. McKinnon said, "I found a list of officers in the non-terrestrial officer section. This does not mean aliens, but the fact that they are not based on Earth. They were serving a fleet that were not American Navy ships, but spaceships away from our planet."
Gary ended up being the first person to uncover tangible proof of these programs through his hacking. Interestingly enough, the information he obtained on the different types of spacecraft, the non-terrestrial officers, fleet-to-fleet transfers, all of this perfectly coincided with Project Solar World.
On April 13, 2009, the U.S. National Archives of Administration provided nearly 250,000 pages of documents during the Reagan administration, including its personal journal. In this, on 11 June 1985, the president wrote, "We have lunch with 5 top scientists in the field of aerospace. It was fascinating. Space is really the last frontier, and some of the developments there in astronomy are science fiction unless they are real. Learned that our transfer capacity is such that we could put 300 people in orbit. This is curious because Space Shuttle has a maximum of 8 people and only 5 for spaceflight. Even fully loaded, it would be impossible to place and maintain 300 astronauts in orbit."
Currently, in the secret space programs, we've been dealing with approximately 60 different non-terrestrial groups that have come here And some of those groups are interacting with the governments of the world right now.
But I would like us to go into those files and hopefully make as much of that public as possible. If there's nothing there, let's tell people there's nothing there.
What if there is something there?
Well, if there is something there, unless it's a threat to national security, I think we ought to share it with the public.
Well, did you look? Did you see? Did you explore?
I can't reveal anything.
Oh, really?
You know, it's funny. My daughters asked the very same question.
They did?
Yeah.
Would you be allowed to tell your daughters what was in those files?
No.
You would not?
No.
Now that you're out of office, you can do anything you want, right?
True, yeah. But I'm not telling you.
It's at
The aliens won't let it happen. You reveal all their secrets. They exercise strict control over us.
Reagan has revealed the existence of a highly classified space program that could host hundreds of astronauts in orbit. Breakthrough technologies emerge rapidly as time advances, and the public is most of the time left in the dark. What government institutions have developed and understood during the past centuries would greatly challenge our life understanding. So why would they break this perfect control paradigm when they can just leave it so and operate from the shadows? In recent years, countless people have reported seeing flying objects of strange shapes, including triangular and spectacular trajectories.
UFO reports are still a thing. People are reporting them in greater and greater numbers every year.
Without ever challenging the existence of UFOs of ancient origin, we must make it clear that some of such aircraft are in fact owned and used in the greatest secrecy by the U.S. government. TR-3B Astra, from myth to reality. If you have the slightest idea about UFO sightings, unidentified flying objects, you probably just stare at the sky and wonder what kind of aliens control these things. But when it comes to TR-3B Astra, it's not what you'd expect at all.
If a tree's falling in the forest, you need somebody to hear it, so if there's a UFO in the sky, the more people around to see it, the more reports you get.
To understand the truth about TR-3B Astra, you'll have to catch a glimpse of the world of Aurora, one of the best-kept government secrets to this day. To make a clearer picture, Aurora is not a planet of aliens or an invading army of cyborgs. As a matter of fact, this name has its roots right here in the U.S. So, what is this TR-3B Astra, also known as the Black Triangle? Is a nuclear-powered anti-gravity aircraft secretly built and maintained by the U.S. government. It all started in 1982 with the Black Program, a secret Air Force project funded with what is known as the Black Budget, estimated to be worth about $3 billion. The technology behind this aircraft is considered beyond everyday technology. Some even point out that it might as well have been inspired by alien technology. For example, this aircraft has a stealth flight mode, a trait uncommon for decades ago. The TR-3B Astra is extremely lightweight, giving it the ability to easily outmaneuver other aircrafts. This is possible through a technology known as MFD technology. The MFD is a short form of a circular plasma-filled accelerator ring called a magnetic field disruptor. This technology, designed by the Sandia and Livermore laboratories, is so powerful that it was concealed entirely by the government, making it non-existent on paper. As you would expect, a lot of money goes into this research. A good amount of tax money pour into this project carried out at the notorious Area 51 Groom Lake Air Base in Nevada. To understand how massive the operations going on in Nevada are, know that the government owns about 80% of all the lands in Nevada. There are 18,000 federal and military personnel working there, with another 20,000 contractors. It is quite easy to keep a project of this proportion a secret when it unfolds in plain sight. Even at the Groom Lake facility, not everyone knows about the operations. It took a while before people started noticing.
I am convinced, based on my research and the individuals whom I've had contact in the U.S. intelligence community, that the U.S. government does indeed have craft that meet the description of many of the UFO reports.
According to a newly leaked Pentagon report, in 2004, a U.S. aircraft carrier was stalked for several days by a UFO.
Yes. What is that?
The earliest media reports of sightings were in the United States and the United Kingdom. As you would expect, the government didn't bother with it too much. However, starting with the 29th of November 1989, a good number of sightings were reported in the Belgian territories, with the first event documented by at least 30 groups of witnesses and 3 separate groups of policemen. Today, this is known as the Belgium UFO wave.
Perhaps the most convincing evidence for UFOs can be found in Brussels, of all places. For a period of about 2 years, the whole country was affected by a wave of sightings. They'd been seen by witnesses, the police, and by local radar stations.
By the 30th of March the following year, a frantic call from a captain of the Belgian National Police spurred their military into action. On this day, this UFO was verified by a NATO radar installation and another one belonging to the Belgian military force. But it only took this remarkable aircraft a few seconds to outmaneuver them and break out of sight. It was reported that the UFO suddenly sped up and dropped its altitude in a way that would have been impossible for any man-made aircraft. This suggests that this UFO could have been remote-controlled from an external location. If you wonder how this UFO was able to bypass the ground radars, look no further than the MFD technology we mentioned earlier. This MFD ring surrounding the rotating crew compartment has this mercury-based plasma that is pressurized to 250,000 atmospheres at a temperature of 123.15 degrees Celsius. The result is a stunning superconducting plasma with 50,000 revolutions per minute, which would easily generate a magnetic field that reduces gravity by 89%. Please don't confuse this with the standard anti-gravity technology. This is far more powerful. While the anti-gravity technology literally pushes against the ground with a repulsive force which then lifts the aircraft up, this is more efficient. What the MFD does is to generate a magnetic vortex field. This is what neutralizes or disrupts the effects of gravity by 89% en masse within proximity. There is a reactive electrical system set on the outer coating of its fuselage to help absorb reflections from radar beams. This essentially helps it stay invisible, but it does even more. The polymer shell with the reactive coating can easily disguise such a huge aircraft as the TR-3B, making it look like just another tiny aircraft. It could also make it look like several airplanes flying together, giving an illusion of a false radar reading. This technology is also behind the extreme velocity and altitude this covert craft can achieve. A report published on darkgovernment.com made us know that this UFO can easily reach the altitude of 120,000 feet or 36,000 meters. The speed is purported to be around Mach 9. Let that sink in for a moment. That's almost 7,000 miles per hour, making it the fastest aircraft in the world. Why this was kept in the shadows is an intrigue we can only speculate on. There are beliefs that these crafts are being used for modern warfare, with references to the Gulf War, for example. There have been sightings as recent as 2018, with such a big project taking a center stage in the black projects ordered by the US government, one can only wonder what they are all being prepared for. The Aurora project is one of the largest and probably the most important projects in the history of the US Army. Is this about alien or human technology? Or is it about both of them combined? On the other hand, disclosure in the press of this information will prevent and completely dismantle the various manipulations of an eventual alien invasion or other similar rumors that are being made to escape the black operations. Glorious, pale, veiled in mystery and intrigue, it's been piercing the darkness of night with its rays ever since time immemorial. There hasn't been a single culture to not worship the moon. In fact, all living organisms have an affinity for it. For tens of thousands of years, humans have been fond of this heavenly body found in close proximity to Earth. All past generations have thought of what could lie on the moon, or what its purpose might be, or if it gives man any kind of special abilities. Humans have craved for so long to unravel the moon mystery, and the answer remained only at the stretch of their imagination, since there was no way on Earth they could reach it. Beyond the moon.
We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
We are go for launch. T-minus 60 seconds and counting.
In 1969, with the entire world watching and holding its breath, the Apollo 11 crew, Buzz Aldrin, Neil Armstrong, and Michael Collins, have finally reached this notorious celestial body.
That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
It was indeed a small step for man, and at the same time, a giant leap for mankind. To everybody's surprise, the moon proved desolate and gray. There were no special findings whatsoever, except for a bunch of soil samples and rocks retrieved by the crew. And, of course, a lush collection of videotapes with the spaceflight and landing.
We, the crew of Apollo 11, are privileged to represent the United States in our first attempt to take man to another heavenly body.
Subsequent years have seen 9 other astronauts walk on the moon's surface. Every time, they would bring to Earth more and more soil samples, weighing hundreds of pounds, as well as priceless video footage.
Now, Neil's small step for man, which was his step, one human being, but humankind made a gigantic leap in going to the moon to be able to do that. Now, some people could say that it's a small step, Apollo going to the moon, a giant leap, and they've thought about the future. When is the giant leap going to happen? Yeah. But that wasn't meant to be a prophetic proclamation for the future.
Then, after a while, some of the images were thrown out of the archive oven into the public's grasp. And there were plenty of anomalies that caught the eye, especially eerie lights and out-of-place objects that surrounded the missions.
60 seconds.
Of course, they were all ignored or debunked as lens flares or video glitches. But many people refused to put their trust in the official explanation and began scrutinizing the public data they had at their disposal. NASA claimed there was nothing out of the ordinary regarding the moon, but people sensed there was something more than met the eye. The first recordings of Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin walking on the moon's surface were all grainy and blurry, although Hollywood movie quality in 1969 was pretty neat, or at least vastly superior than the original footage recorded on the moon.
My name's Bond. James Bond.
Hey! I'm walking here! I'm walking here!
You are not looking for anybody. You cannot find anybody.
People were demanding answers, and the pressure on NASA grew as days progressed. And then it happened.
Good afternoon and welcome to NASA's Kennedy Space Center.
In 2016, NASA admitted that the original footage of the first moon landing from 1969 was entirely lost. An investigation led by NASA engineer Richard Nafzger revealed that the priceless Apollo 11 tapes, along with 200,000 others, were degaussed or magnetically erased in order to be reused by the agency to save money. To tackle this grave issue, they grabbed available cassette copies from CBS News archives, together with other recordings stored at Johnson Space Center, and sent them all to a man named Lowry, best known for restoring old Hollywood films, so that he would digitalize and render what was left of the original footage. Thousands of years of waiting to reach the moon's surface, and the most prestigious space institution had erased the original evidence of the first moon landing like it was nothing of importance. And the worst part, they wouldn't let the public know about it, at least not entirely. Almost 5 decades after the initial man's descent on the lunar surface, and numerous questions with equivocal answers remain. Have we really been up there? Or was the moon landing staged inside a Hollywood basement? Is the moon really a natural satellite? Or is it rather artificial in nature?
Two Russian physicists, Vasin and Shebekov, came up with the idea that the moon must be an artificial object. That would mean that the moon had to be an artificial, an engineered object.
This suggestion is outlandish. However, it's only through their calculations and all the mathematics they determined that their theory is correct.
And so these Russian scientists, their theory is that the moon is a spaceship, it's got engines within, but that on the outside they've coated it with this moon-looking substance. Now, it's a far-fetched idea, but it makes a lot of sense in that you might want to shroud or cloak this craft and make it look like a very natural object.
And contains cities and structures that are inside and outside of the moon.
What did they discover on the lunar surface that they're not letting us know about? What's with all the strange and bright objects surrounding the lunar landings?
I'd prefer to see us go to Mars rather than go back to the moon, unless we need the moon as a stepping stone to Mars. It could be that in studying Mars, you will discover that the best way to do it is by way of a base on the moon, and if that turns out to be the case, well and good, but I see the moon really not as an end in itself, but really a stepping stone to deeper space, to Mars and to the planets beyond.
What is the moon? According to science, the moon is a natural satellite locked in Earth's orbit that exerts a gravitational force on our planet responsible with pulling on water in the oceans and causing bulges that create high tide. We can only see one of its two faces, as the dark side of the moon lies concealed away from any curious eyes. When looked at through a telescope, the moon reveals many intriguing features deemed natural by the scientific community. There are numerous formations, especially inside craters, that greatly resemble artificial structures, the likes we see here on Earth. They also reflect a great deal of sunlight. Because of these, researchers pursuing alternative truths have wondered if there isn't already an active moon operation in place. After all, the moon is a very strategic spot. It has one hidden side where you can place all the bases without anyone noticing, while the other side is constantly keeping an eye on unaware Earthlings.
But why, some say, the moon? Why choose this as our goal?
And judging by the space race of the 60s, where the US competed against the Soviet Union to claim first spot on the moon, they really wanted to get the operations going.
We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills. Because that challenge is one that we're willing to accept, one we are unwilling to postpone, and one we intend to win, and the others too.
Whoever reached the lunar surface first had the upper hand in establishing the first facility, as well as discovering what was up there. After this duel had been comfortably won by the US, a new age to conquer Earth's orbit as well as space began. On March 23, 1983, during the Cold War between Soviet Russia and Western powers, President Ronald Reagan initiated the Strategic Defense Initiative, or SDI.
Let me share with you a vision of the future which offers hope. It is that we embark on a program to counter the awesome Soviet missile threat with measures that are defensive. Let us turn to the very strengths in technology that spawned our great industrial base and that have given us the quality of life we enjoy today. What if free people could live secure in the knowledge that their security did not rest upon the threat of instant U.S. retaliation to deter a Soviet attack, that we could intercept and destroy strategic ballistic missiles before they reached our own soil or that of our allies?
The president said he was launching a massive research effort to develop space-age weapons that would bring down or incapacitate Soviet missiles before they reached the U.S. This, the president claimed, would secure the U.S. against nuclear attack and eventually make nuclear weapons themselves obsolete.
I know this is a formidable technical task, one that may not be accomplished before the end of this century. Yet current technology has attained a level of sophistication where it's reasonable for us to begin this effort.
The project, dubbed Star Wars, was meant to deflect the Russian intercontinental ballistic missiles in case they were launched towards the US or Europe. In order to tackle the heavy artillery, breakthrough technologies had to be developed and installed in orbit. The project received funding but was short-lived. The Cold War had ended 2 years later, and the space technology seemed too complex and costly. So later, administrators had to reduce the SDI to a minimum. Of course, what went on behind closed doors remains classified to this day. However, various independent researchers believe they know what's happening above us, and I have to tell you, it's like something out of a sci-fi movie.
Gigantic, hollow spaceship that's been put into a special orbit around our planet and contains cities and structures that are inside and outside of the moon.
Skywatcher John Leonard Walson has captured mind-boggling footage of spaceships stationed in Earth's orbit in close proximity to the moon. He's captured a mothership and other small vessels on camera, together with other moon structures believed to be artificial and part of a larger complex. So, is it possible that world superpowers have already established a moon colony and are waiting for the opportune moment to make this news public? Or are we dealing with extraterrestrial beings that have dwelled on the moon for who knows how long? This would explain why nobody has set foot on the moon for such a long time. Is there a pact between these beings and our earthly leaders? Whatever the case, there are just too many strange things happening when it comes to the moon. For instance, in 2009, NASA had bombed the moon in a $79 million attempt to learn if there is water out there. The explosion was meant to raise 6-kilometer-high plumes of dust that would confirm the existence of water on the lunar surface or not. The mission failed to reach the predicted outcome, and many were left scratching their heads as to what had happened. The Cabeus crater where the explosion had taken place is on the dark side of the moon, further fueling beliefs that NASA had bombed a Russian or alien base instead.
This is Apollo Saturn Launch Control. We are still go at this time. T-minus 15, 14, 13, 12, 11, 10, 9. We have ignition sequence start. The engines are on. 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. We have commit. We have liftoff. Liftoff at 7:51 a.m. Eastern Standard Time.
On December 21, 1968, NASA's Apollo 8 mission marked the first manned mission outside of Earth's orbit and around the moon. Close to 3,000 photos were captured using a 70mm camera installed on the spacecraft. Before heading back to Earth, the camera snapped a peculiar picture of what appears to be a huge entrance into the lunar surface. No more pictures were taken afterwards. When the public demanded explanations, the astronauts blamed this on a camera glitch. And there are just too many weird things happening on the dark side of the moon. During their 1969 lunar voyage, Apollo 10 crew heard weird music coming from this unseen part of Earth's satellite. So, could the moon be more than what we are taught to believe? Well, after successfully carrying the first astronauts on the moon and back to Earth, the spacecrafts were deliberately crashed into the lunar surface to serve scientific purposes. We don't know exactly what the researchers have concluded, but we do know what they heard: the moon ringing like a bell when struck. With so many theories out there, it's challenging to determine which point of view is right or wrong, and how close we are to the truth. At the end of the day, our own research and life understanding will offer the answers we need and are craving for. If there are aliens involved, or humans, or even both, we can only speculate. Nikola Tesla, the genius, his legend, and his inventions. Anyone who truly knows the story of Nikola Tesla would tell you how they gaped in awe and shook their head in sadness. The awe would be because of how great Tesla's innovative mind was, and the sadness would be about what could have been possible if Nikola Tesla had received all the necessary attention and support he needed and rightfully deserved. Nikola Tesla was a genius, forgotten in his time by the commercial pressures of other inventors like Thomas Edison. He was a true hero of science that sadly never came to the prominence he deserved. The good news is that, in recent years, his memory is being preserved. Great online campaigns like the Oatmeal's incredible feat to help build a Tesla museum have helped this inventor to be recognized as one of the true geniuses of the beginning of the great electricity revolution. wireless energy. One of his greatest inventions that never saw the light of day because he could not find funding is the Wardenclyffe Tower, or better known as the Tesla Tower. This genius believed that he was able to find a way to transmit energy through the air, just as today we are able to transmit data wirelessly. Thanks to many towers around the world that serve as transmitters. This was a dream so big that, having found the resources to create a prototype with his first tower in his laboratory in Shoreham, New York, he would have changed the world forever, with one of the evolutions that we can only dream of and maybe compare with the internet or jet engines. Tesla managed to see his tower completely finished, but in the absence of money, it was demolished in 1917. As a data, Tesla showed that the transmission of energy was possible by electrostatic induction in 1891. A world with wireless charging. Imagine a world where Tesla was considered what he is, a genius whose inventions could change the world. Imagine that the Wardenclyffe Tower was completed and that Nikola Tesla secured the funding to create a company to manage the thousands of wireless charging towers around the world. We would live in a world so different, in which decades could have advanced in many aspects. Imagine that Tesla managed to make it possible to transmit energy between America and Europe, could have created electric planes able to cross the Atlantic decades before Charles Lindbergh managed to cross the ocean non-stop between New York and Paris. We could have changed the Industrial Revolution, created in the 19th century, that was moving to coal by a much cleaner system. Renewable energies could have taken on a much more important role than they have today, if the Tesla towers would need a lot of energy to be able to distribute it. It would take large power stations to generate it, such as large hydroelectric power stations. But if the renewable power take over, it could have been possible to create a truly clean and wireless electric charging system. Just think of any electrical device you have right now, from the device you are reading this from to your everyday home appliances, and try hard to imagine a world where you would never know what a charging cable is, or how it feels for your device to run out of battery. Imagine electric planes flying through the skies, millions of cars without emitting CO2, industries capable of operating without the need to pollute the air, innovations of all kinds of technology in our body that would not need batteries, such as robotic legs for injuries. That was probably the world that would have been had Tesla got the support he needed, but he didn't.
Pocket change to a man of your
Damn
wealth.
it, Tesla.
Please.
Wireless electricity for the world, and all one needs is a cheap little device to receive it. How do you charge people for that? There's no goddamn profit in it, you vainglorious idiot.
His plan focused more on serving humanity than enriching his pockets. Many investors didn't see the big picture, but rather focused on what they would make at the moment. It was easy for the more money-making idea of Thomas Edison to fly, even though it was inferior. At the end, it was all about the money, not the service. Earthquake machine. It was a quiet day in 1898 when the residents of several blocks of buildings in the crowded Chinese and Italian neighborhoods of Manhattan began to experience a tremor that soon began to shake all the buildings and shatter glass, causing people to run scared on the streets of New York. The police were forced to rush in to assess the situation. After checking that the quake was confined to that small part of the city and suspecting who could be the cause, the police sent 2 of their agents to 46 East Houston Street. Just before entering the building, they noticed that the tremor stopped, and when they passed through the door of a laboratory, they were received by a tall and thin man with a mustache, elegantly dressed and armed with a hammer. The man calmly told them, "Gentlemen, I am sorry. You are just a trifle too late to witness my experiment. I found it necessary to stop it suddenly and unexpectedly in an unusual way. However, if you will come around this evening, I will have another oscillator attached to a platform, and each of you can stand on it. You will, I am sure, find it a most interesting and pleasurable experience. Now you must leave, for I have many things to do. Good day." Of course, that man was Tesla. The cause of that incident had been a small electromechanical oscillator with which Tesla was experimenting that day for his research into mechanical resonance. After placing it on a pillar of his laboratory, the vibration caused by the instrument began to spread throughout the underground of the building to neighboring buildings, creating chaos among its neighbors. So absorbed and fascinated was Tesla that he did not decide to end the experiment until he noticed that his entire laboratory was shaking vigorously. Another of his experiments he would tell a few years later to a journalist. This time, Tesla decided to experiment outside his laboratory, and after locating a building under construction in the Wall Street neighborhood, which was still a metal skeleton, he placed the oscillator on one of the beams and activated it. In a few minutes, the entire structure of 10 floors of the building began to vibrate, frightening the workers and causing the police to make an appearance again. Before anyone could realize what was happening, Tesla deactivated the device, put it in his pocket, and continued on his way. In the same interview, the inventor said that in less than an hour he could knock down the Brooklyn Bridge, and he even claimed that with a suitable machine and dynamite, he would be able to split the Earth in two. Possible cause of Tunguska 1908 explosion.
People who observed that thought the end of the world had come, Judgment Day, divine intervention.
Among the many theories that were developed to uncover what happened in Tunguska in the year 1908, many blame what happened to Nikola Tesla. It all started when Tesla proclaimed to everyone that he had a weapon popularly known as the death ray, able to send an electromagnetic ray across hundreds of kilometers and to destroy a great part of Earth, hinting that with this weapon he could break the Earth as if it were an apple. He sent a letter to Woodrow Wilson, the American president at the time, in which he explained the operation of his machine and claimed to have proof of its proper functioning, which was ideal for destroying large tracts of land, and would only make one condition, which is that the use of this invention was made for defensive purposes. He recounted in this letter that in 1908, while his friend Robert Peary tried to reach the North Pole, he sent one of his death rays to fall to the west of where his friend was, and a few days before sent a telegram that essentially notified Peary that he would send a lightning close to where Peary was, and that Peary would tell him how everything had gone. His intention was that his friend and the crew he was leading would observe an intense luminosity at dusk. However, nothing happened. Neither Peary nor his crew saw anything. The curious thing is that the same day that Peary theoretically arrived at the North Pole, about 16,000 kilometers away, the Tunguska explosion occurred.
The Tunguska disaster changed our view of the world and our place in the cosmos, because until then we thought that we were basically very protected.
As President Wilson ignored him, there were indications that he sent this same letter to other world leaders, who also stopped taking the Tesla invention seriously. To continue with this theory, we must remember that in that decade, there were several explosions of lesser severity and intensity in different parts of the Earth, which some audacious people attributed to the Tesla's death ray, based on Tesla's comment on how powerful it was. Do you remember the earthquake experiment we discussed some paragraphs away, which he did in his laboratory, showing how powerful his inventions were? Months after this experiment, he commented that he could destroy the Earth if he wanted to. With this type of apocalyptic discourse that today we would describe as terrorist, the governments and those capable of financing it backed out, in fear of what he was capable of. Another endorsement that his experiments were very real is that he managed to create energy of 4 million volts with the intention of lighting all the lamps in 40 kilometers around. The pity is that although he succeeded, his laboratory exploded. If Tesla was indeed behind the Tunguska incident, it would have been an error. It might also further explain why his Wardenclyffe Tower was destroyed in 1917, and why he gave little comment about that. If this were true, it would have been an unintentional mistake, and must have caused a huge blow to him. Particle beam weapon. This invention started from what Tesla called teleforce, an idea Tesla said he conceived after studying the Van de Graaff generator.
If every nation equips themselves with this, not one would dare fire the first shot.
An electrostatic machine that uses a moving belt to accumulate large amounts of electrical charge in the interior of a hollow metal sphere.
I had made appointments to unveil this at the World Peace Conference in Geneva.
The production of X-rays or experiments in particle physics and nuclear physics could be applied with the generator. According to Tesla, the particle beam weapon, also known as death ray or peace ray, was a weapon that would be capable of being used against an entire ground infantry or for anti-aircraft purposes.
Tesla was making very substantial claims about so-called teleforce rays that could bring down airplanes from thousands of miles away.
This single weapon would be so powerful that it would be able to destroy anything that is in a radius of 300 to 400 kilometers. This would have proved to be particularly useful in preventing wars, as it would be able to put an end to it before it started at all. Between the 1920s and 1930s, there were, in addition to Tesla, other inventors such as Marconi, Matthews, or Edwin R. Scott, who claimed to have invented the weapon. In 1923, Edwin R. Scott claimed to be the first to develop a death ray, with the ability to destroy even aircraft at a great distance. Scott claimed that he worked a decade on the artifact. A year later, Harry Matthews appeared trying to sell to the British Air Ministry what he defined as a death ray. The truth is that none of them were able to show an operating model. Soon, Tesla would arrive on the scene at the beginning of the 1930s. The genius affirmed to have invented the death ray under the name of teleforce and maintained the claim of such achievement until the end of his days. Earlier, in the mid-1910s, Tesla had already spoken of a weapon that would mark the beginning of the end of wars as they knew it. Tesla spoke about the end of gunpowder due to armed conflicts marked by electricity, a time where his cannon would be the ultimate weapon.
I have devised a complete system. Generators, motors, transformers. Everything we need to bring our civilization into the future.
Years after the fall of the Wardenclyffe Tower, with Tesla living between his great genius and inventiveness and his economic problems, he kept looking for a way to make his particle beam theory something of great importance. To do this, he went on to imagine the invention with military applications. The idea was to get some department to accept the project he had in his head. This was the reason why his dedication and efforts thereafter were directed to the service of the military. In 1934, when Tesla described the function of the weapon and the reason for its construction, he emphasized that he was all about peace. Until then, all devices that could be used for defense could also be used for the sake of aggression. This nullified the value of making improvements for the purpose of peace. Tesla developed a new idea that can be used mainly for defense. If successful and adopted, it would have revolutionized relations between nations. It would have made any country, large or small, impregnable to armies, airplanes, and other means of combat. Tesla's invention required great machinery and lots of resources. but once achieved, it would have been able to destroy anything. The Soviet Union actually invested $25,000 into the idea, asking for an exchange of plans and ideas. Upon the declassification of the Tesla's documents seized by the U.S. intelligence upon his death, it became clear that even the U.S. government was interested, among other governments.
During the Second World War, I'm sure that governments on both sides would have loved to have gotten their hands on Tesla's death ray, or at least the plans for one.
So, why couldn't Tesla develop the death ray? The answer is the same as many of the great ideas he had in life. Tesla spent his last years announcing this possibility, and despite the interest of the media, who were the ones who coined that bothersome term death ray, the financing was ultimately the one that made it impossible to carry it out. At the time of his death, Tesla had unsuccessfully approached many other companies to finally end up knocking on the doors of the governments of many allied countries, like the United Kingdom, with the sole purpose of bringing Teleforce to a successful conclusion. However, all would renounce the project due to the large investment. Dynamic theory of gravity. In the dynamic theory of gravity, Nikola Tesla explains how the gravity is related to the electromagnetic force. This is a model that deals with matter, ether, and energy, and how these three things relate to one another. It is a unified field theory that unites all the existing fundamental forces and the responses of the particles themselves in a theoretical framework. This theory, proposed by Nikola Tesla, has been so suppressed because the big powers do not want this information to be published. If you are wondering why, just remember that Tesla believed in clean energy. No one needs a soothsayer to realize how the oil and natural gas companies would obviously stand against such development. Nikola Tesla proposed that gravity is a field effect. At the time he announced his critique of Einstein's work, he was criticized by the scientific community. Today, this same theory is now being given a more serious consideration by scientists. At first, this theory was developed between 1892 and 1894, during the period when Nikola Tesla was conducting experiments with high frequency and high current potential. In 1897, when Tesla presented his theory of the dynamics of gravity, he said that all bodies emit microwaves whose voltage and frequency are determined by their electrical content and relative motion. More than 100 years ago, Nikola Tesla managed to measure the microwave radiation of our planet and concluded that it is only a couple of centimeters of wavelength. Tesla went on to say that the frequency and voltage of the microwave radiation on Earth was greatly influenced by the speed and mass of our planet. The gravitational interaction with other celestial bodies, such as the Sun, was determined by the interaction of the microwaves between the celestial bodies. Tesla confirmed this by placing two metal plates at a distance and electrifying them with high voltage, high-frequency currents, Tesla currents or microwave. With sufficient high voltage and frequency, the space between them became solid state. He also worked with a single plate, zinc, 1/8 of an inch thick by 12 inches, weighing approximately 2 pounds, suspended in the air. Although these principles guided his research and his experiments of the future, Tesla did not announce his theory until near the end of his life, after being disappointed by the war. The dynamic theory of gravity is not mentioned as it should, and this is because the government of the United States classified the file. Unfortunately, few details were publicly stated by Tesla about his theory. The issue of how space is curved by gravitational effect, leading some to believe that Tesla did not understand Einstein's theory, was not about curving space at all, but about a curved space-time. There is disagreement about Tesla's exact understanding of Einstein's theories. The truth is that there was a great difference between Tesla and Einstein. While the former wanted the best for humanity, the second defended the big powers. According to this theory, the concept of ether is similar to what dark energy would be. Tesla said that space was not curved, and that all forces were related to each other, both the speed of sound and the speed of light and X-rays. To solve this phenomenon, he used his deep knowledge of mathematics, believed by many to be Venusian. This technology about anti-gravity has been known for a long time, but it is not convenient to make it known. It is much more lucrative to have limited energies in order to be able to impose astronomical prices, as in the case of oil. It is also better to have short-lived and polluting energies to keep the business booming. If you knew the magnificence of the numbers 3, 6, and 9, you would have the key to the universe. Apparently, with this phrase, Nikola Tesla had pointed to an enigmatic code of creation and universal energy that manifests itself as the material world. Tesla himself followed a kind of organizational ritual, always doing things in series of 3. In the rest of this article, we can see the remarkable combinations that these numbers have, especially the 9. Some of these impressive properties of 9 and their connections to 3 and 6 are based on the 360 degrees of a circle, a number that was chosen with some arbitrariness, according to some mathematicians. Others point out that it obeys a pattern observed in nature. In purely mathematical terms, a circle could have 400, 1,000 degrees, or whatever. But 360 is an especially abundant number. That is, it has many factors. It can be divided into 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 9, 10, 12 parts. While a number like 400 cannot be divided even into 3 equal parts of whole numbers. Likewise, 360 approaches the 365 days of the solar year, this being a kind of cosmic circle used early in astrology and astronomy by the Babylonians and other cultures. The sky was divided into the 12 signs of the zodiac, each occupying 30 degrees, an approximation to a month, the circle being considered a perfect and divine form, and therefore, the 360 was also a divine number. For modern science, however, there is no compelling explanation. Let's see some interesting sequences below. If 9 is added to any number, the result finally adds up to the same number. 1 plus 9 equals 10. 1 plus 0 equals 1. 2 plus 9 equals 11. 1 plus 1 equals 2. 3 plus 9 equals 12. 1 plus 2 equals 3, etc. On the other hand, it is known that if we add all the numbers from 1 to 10 without including the 9, we have 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus 5 plus 6 plus 7 plus 8 equals 36. 3 plus 6 equals 9. Naturally, then, when adding 9, it returns the 9. Likewise, if all the numbers are added, 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus 5 plus 6 plus 7 plus 8 plus 9 equals 45. 4 plus 5 equals 9. This somehow suggests that the 9 models the totality and nothingness simultaneously. It is the singularity and the emptiness at the same time. This is seen like this. Since the sum of all the digits leads to 9, so too 9 plus any other digit returns to the same digit. 9 plus 5 is 14. 1 plus 4 is 5. So, literally, 9 is equal to all digits, 36, and nothing, 0. We see here a description of creation as a dynamic process, not a static one, in which totality is equal to nothing. Other interesting relationships with the 9, as pertaining to 9, are as follows. The day has 1,440 minutes, totaling 9. The day has 86,400 seconds, which total 9. The week has 10,080 minutes, which total 9. The year has 525,600 minutes, which total 9. A circle in space is formed by 360 degrees. 3 plus 6 plus 0 equal 9, whose half is 180 degrees. 1 plus 8 plus 0 equals 9. whose half is 90 degrees. 9 plus 0 equals 9. Whose half is 45? 4 plus 5 equals 9. Whose half is 22.5? 2 plus 2 plus 5 equal 9. Whose half is 11.25? 1 plus 1 plus 2 plus 5 equal 9, to infinity. Perhaps we should also mention the fact that pregnancy in humans usually lasts 9 months or 36 weeks. All over the internet, there are more people fascinated and digging for the secret behind these numbers. Yet Tesla said all these over 100 years ago. No wonder some people believe he is out of this world, literally. There are even reports that he could have been from Venus. But we wouldn't know now, would we? We never really did give him much chance.